Hey guys, Rendoing Productions here, and coming right off the bat and making a video about if statements, I want to complete our Boolean control flow series. And in this video tutorial, I'm going to talk about while loops and for loops, henceforth known as loops. So let's go ahead and jump into our Python REPL. So in the last tutorial, we talked about if statements, which is a way to do things conditionally. Do one thing if something is true, do another thing if it's not true. Well, there's also loops, and most programming languages have these. Python has them as well. And Python has two loops, a while loop and a for loop. So let's start with a while loop. Much like an if statement does something if something is true, a while loop does something while something is true. So, for instance, you can continue doing something while something is enabled, which is a very useful feature. You can continue adding numbers until a target number is reached. Something of that sort. So let's go ahead and jump right into the syntax. Here's the syntax. While, Boolean, colon. Much like the if statement, you have while, and then a Boolean test, and then a colon. So we can do something like while true. Right, and the while loop continues to execute as long as its Boolean is true. So if you provide something like while true, here the Boolean is always true, and then the inside will always execute. This particular while loop is nothing special. As you'll notice, we're kind of stuck here. Our cursor is just blinking, and we can't type anything. So we're going to have to press Control-C to get our REPL back. So that was a quick example. You can also do things like I equals 0. While I is less than 500, I equals I plus 1. Right? So what happened here? We declared a new variable named I. It is 0. While I is less than 500, we add 1 to it. So this we keep going until I is greater than or equal to 500. So if we actually query what I is, it is 500 now, because we basically did addition 499 times. 500 times. So those are the basics of the while loop. Very simple. There are also two keywords that you can use inside of a while loop that are common to other languages as well. For instance, let's say I equals 0, right? While I is less than 500, we want to say if I is 2, for whatever reason, we want to quit the while loop, right? We never actually want I to be 2 or larger than 2 for some reason, so we can actually use the break keyword here, which means quit the loop. So what is the expected behavior here? Well, I equals 0, right? If I is 2, well, it's not, so we're not going to do that. And then I equals I plus 1. So now I is 1. Is I less than 500? Is 1 less than 500? Yes, we'll continue. Is I 2? No. Now I equals 2. Is 2 less than 500? Yes. Is I 2? Yes. So we're going to break, which just means quit the while loop. So the expected behavior here is that I is equal to 2. Great. The alternative to break is called continue, which basically means don't execute the rest of this for loop. Just skip to don't execute the rest of this while loop. Just skip to the beginning again. Right? So we can say while I is less than 10, print I. Or if I is not equal to 5, print I, right? Else, continue. So what is the expected behavior here? Well, for each value of I, so I is currently 2, and, well, actually, so while 2 is less than 10, If I is not equal to 5, we're going to print the value of I, which is 2. Else, which means I is equal to 5, we're going to continue, which means we're not going to actually execute what's in here, and we're just going to continue on to the next portion of the while loop here. And then at the end here, we're going to say I equals I plus 1. So as you can see, what's happened here is while I is 2, right? And then it prints the value because it's not equal to 5. And then it increments. So now we have 3 and 4, and it prints. However, when I is equal to 5, it doesn't print. It goes into this else, and then we go into the continue, which means that it just skips the rest of the while loop and jumps back to the top. So we're never incrementing once we reach to 5 because we're continuing back to the top of the while loop. So now our cursor is once again stuck, constantly continuing. So that's an example of break and continue, and there is the while loop. So the while loop is simple. Basically, while something is true, do something else. The next big loop, also in multiple programming languages, is the for loop. Now, the for loop in Python is a little bit different from the for loop in C, C++, Java. The for loop basically iterates over elements of an iterable object. So what's an iterable object? An iterable object is anything that contains multiple entries, right? So what do we know that contains multiple entries? A list contains multiple items, a dictionary contains multiple keys, a tuple contains multiple items, a string contains multiple characters, so on and so forth. So one of the most common uses of a for loop is to say for item in, and this is the syntax, so for item in iterable. So our iterable is going to be a list here, which just means it has multiple contents. Print item. So you can see here the for loop has actually gone over each item inside of the iterable, assigned it to a variable named item, and then we're able to use it inside of the body of the for loop. So print item. Right, this is often used with a very handy function called range. So if we range 5, we get a iterable that goes from 0 to 5. If we convert this into a list, you can see that it actually produces a list 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we say for I in range 5, print I. And then we get the output there. This is very similar to a C for I equals 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, right? So this is the for loop as well, which is extremely useful to iterate over sequences. And that's the basics of looping in Python. So we're probably going to go over a quick example just to combine the two loops. So basically, our example is going to be given a list of strings, print out the first word that contains the letter A. So we're just going to implement this purely using our for loops and while loops, right? So let's first create a list of words. So we're going to have, let's see if I can come up with words without A's in them. Color, microphone, keyboard. All right, so now we've got a word with an A in it. So we can now say for word in L, right? So this will loop over every word in our sequence here. And now we can say, we can loop over each letter inside of the word, right? So we can say for letter in word, because remember, strings are just a sequence of letters. So for letter in word. If letter is A, print A found in plus word. Right, so we're just going to print out the message A found in, and then we're going to concatenate the word string, which is defined up here. So if we actually go ahead and run this, you can see that there's an A found in the word keyboard. Of course, there are better ways to do this in Python, but those are more advanced patterns that we'll cover in later videos. You can go ahead and experiment on your own, though. Would definitely encourage that. So this kind of thing can also be written with a while loop. So a while loop will require some extra information, but we'll go ahead and try it. We'll say I equals 0, right? And then we can say while I is less than the length of L. For word equals Li, right? So we're basically going to use I as an index, much like other languages, starting it off at index 0, and then we're going, every time that I is less than the length, so the length here is 3, the last index is 2. So while I is between 0 and 2, we're going to say that the word is the ith slot of L, and then we're going to do the same thing for letter in word. If letter is A, print A found in word. Right? And then at the end here of our for loop, we want to make sure that we increment I. If we don't increment I, well, we will continue executing this while loop forever. Now, here is the Python increment syntax. We haven't covered that yet. And notice that I did not use I++. In Python, I++ is actually not defined. There is no post increment or pre-increment in Python. So you always have to do plus equals and then the actual number that you're adding. So if we go ahead and run this, you'll see it does the exact same thing. A is found in keyboard, except here we're able to use a while loop to determine whether or not we, or to rather iterate over each word inside of our word list. So those are the basics of for loops and while loops in Python, two very basic and very important control flow items. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you have any questions or commentary, feel free to leave the comments. That's what they're there for. And the next tutorial is going to be talking about functions, so look out for that, and I'll see you then. Have a good one.